accreditation guarantee that the activities are done well. That's why we are concerned, because there are many standards. There are many different ratings, but there is no methods on this. So this leave the rooms for greenwashing. There is a lot of greenwashing.
Accreditation is a way of life.
One of the actions that organizations are taking is to focus on issues of pressing importance.
What the customers really want out of their accredited certification.
I believe we have an impact on everyday's life.
It's important to be inclusive. It is important really to be open.
And that will be one additional way to ensure that the voice of industry and user is heard and recognized.
Hello and welcome to the second episode of the IAF and ILAC podcast Accreditation Matters, where we discuss with international experts matters of the importance to the quality infrastructure community and the way accreditation can support regulators, global trade and consumers. My name is Rebecca Sheehan and I am your host today. I am joined here by IAF Chair Emanuele Riva and the chairperson for the African Accreditation Cooperation, or AFRAC, Ron Josias. Welcome both. Today we are delving into the environment, social and governance framework and the way accreditation supports this initiative. But before we get into that, I might hand it over to you both to give a brief introduction into your roles and your experience in this field. We might start with you, Emanuele.
Hello everybody, I'm Emanuele Riva, I'm the chair of IAF. IAF is the international network for accreditation that includes accreditation bodies, stakeholders and other partners. And I'm also the Vice General Director of Accredit, that is the Italian National Accreditation Body. It's years that we are working in this field in different schemes. Personally, also in Italy, we are working with the Italian Accreditation Body to develop standards on this regard.
Ron, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself as well.
Good day, everyone. My name is Ron Josias. I'm the chairperson of the African Accreditation Corporation, AFRAC. AFRAC is an association of accreditation bodies on the African continent. My experience in accreditation spans over 25 years, where I worked for the South African National Accreditation Systems, initiating quite a few of the programs that we currently have international recognition for. And I have been the Chief Executive Officer of SANAS for about 11 years, until about 2 years ago when my last term expired. I served on the ILAC executive also for about more than 10 years as well. And so, yes, my experience in that component of accreditation, conformity system, and quality infrastructure issues has been well and good over the past few years. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So we'll just dive straight in. Emanuele, for those not in the know, can you tell us a little bit about what is environment, social and governance and why it's so important?
Yes, these three words, environment, social and governance, are the three pillars of sustainability. That's why it's so important. And these ESG criteria are important because they make possible to measure the environmental, social, and governance performance of a company on the basis of the standardized approach and shared parameters. So it's a way to measure companies. Otherwise, everybody can declare to be sustainable, but without a real and actual basis. So it's a tool that is used to evaluate the performance of the company and to measure the performance. This started mainly with the Agenda 2030 of ONU. This was in 2015. This is the main step. That's why we are now talking so much. There have been also other events that are important, always in 2015 for Agreement of Paris on the mitigation of the increase of the temperature. And also in Europe, we have the Fit for 55. This is a target in Europe also to reduce the temperature. So there are three important events that are connected to these environmental, social, governance indicators.
Excellent. I think you've answered my next question, which was, why are we seeing this shift? Obviously, there's a bit of a push from regulators and the policymakers. Is that correct?
Yes, it's correct, but also by the society and by the market. So it's not just only the regulators. The regulators move when the people move. So in this case, the regulators have been able to understand which are the main topics, and so one after the other, now they are developing new regulations that are tackle this problem.
Excellent. And Ron, how does accreditation fit into all of this? How do we become accredited to ESG? Is there a management system for this, or where does it actually fit under the IAF MLA or ILAC MRA scope?
Yeah. So, Rebecca, thank you very much for that question. Let me touch on also, just expand what Emanuela was saying and just give a concise definition or the way that we would see the ESG issues. Principally, it comes down to acting responsibly in a sustainable manner. So it's a responsibility for organizations in terms of how they manage the environment. So in environmental issues, all the standards that we currently have that deals with environmental protection issues becomes quite important in there. Accreditation got a big role to play in that. The same goes for our social and welfare, social welfare issues of how do we treat people, and how do we make sure that the decisions that we make and the actions that companies take and the impact that have on the people is not detrimental to the people and to the environment as such. And therefore, accreditation has an important role to play in the health and the safety of people as well. For instance, if we look at, for instance, refineries that produce oil, the gas that we use in our motor vehicles, etc. It exposes people to a lot of danger. If something goes wrong, for instance, the accreditation inspection, for instance, got an important role to play to ensure that those equipment and the refineries get operated or operates safely. The same goes for us in terms of the decisions we make in governance, the boards and how they look at the environment and how do we protect the environment. So in all these spheres of ESG, accreditation's got a huge role to play in all assets and all aspects of ESG.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so moving on, I suppose we should break down the elements of ESG and explain a little bit more how accreditation can help support each of the themes. So we'll start with environment, which is fitting because our World Accreditation Day theme this year was sustainability in the environment and the economy. Emanuele, do you want to start by letting us know how accredited certifications help support that environmental aspect?
Yes. It's important to understand that there are plenty of standards and schemes that are connected to sustainability and on these themes. Of course, most of them are related to environment, but there are also other areas that are important. For environment, the most famous is the ISO 14001, that is now is well established, well used all over the world. It's important also to remember the energy management system, and in this period where energy is so much costly, so it's important to reduce the use of energy. So these two are, I think, the most important example as a management system. However, I'd like to connect this also to the ESG rating. In this period, there are a lot of discussion regarding the sustainable finance. And in this regard, there are indicators, there are different ideas, different standards that are trying to make in connection the performance of the companies with the ESG ratings. So this is, I think, the area that we have to cover. So there are standards for environment, many standards for environment issued by ISO and also by other private scheme owners. But the difficulty is to connect the performance of the company declared by a standard to the ratings that have the company. So this is something that is missing now, that has to be, we have to work out.
Okay, so how do you see accreditation playing out in that area? How are we going to connect the two?
Accreditation is working with the institutions now that are important in this field. For example, at European level is EFRAG, or international level is IFRS. There are the International Institute for the Ratings. Also in Europe, there is a directive that is focused on this topic. It's called CSRD directive. So there are many works that are under process in this moment. So the accreditation helps the connection between the standards, the regulators, and the conformity assessment bodies. Accreditation guarantee that the activities are done well. That's why we are concerned, because there are many standards. There are many different ratings, but there is no methods on this. So this leave the rooms for greenwashing. There is a lot of greenwashing. There is a recent research that demonstrates that the 70% of the companies declare to be sustainable, but without any real proof of that. So accreditation is something that guarantees that a declaration is correct. So our goal is to guarantee the claims. In this area there are many claims, and there is also, it's important to mention maybe the standard 17029, that is a standard issued by ISO for the verification and validation of claims. And in all the world, I think there are 2-3 accreditation only. So all the claims that are out in the market today, they are not verified by a conformity assessment body under accreditation. That is significant to understand that there is a lot of work to be done.
Yeah. Ron, how are we going to cover this vast range of activities that aren't covered by an accredited certification or even testing or inspection, and have no real, I don't want to say no real basis, because they might think that they have a real basis to their claims, but how do we bring that additional level of credibility and trust to these claims with accreditation?
The question is a very important question in the sense that, yes, we do have a lot of bodies claiming to be competent to do testing, inspection, or certification, etc. But we know that the independent third-party verification of that competence through accreditation is probably the only means currently that can give surety to the market and to governments and to the people about the reliability of results that's being produced. So for us to, as ILAC and IAF and the accreditation community, to bring that home, it does require, as Emmanuel said, it does require us to step out a bit further, having things such as what you're having now, creating the awareness of the importance of accreditation that give confidence to everybody in both in the areas of health, in safety, and in environment as well. Let's take, for instance, what's going on in the world right now. ESG is becoming so important now. It's been there all the time. It's becoming much more important now because now it is real. We see the drought in Europe. We see droughts in the Americas. We see droughts in Africa. We see the impact that we had on the environment by acting irresponsibly towards the environment. So we cannot create water. We have not found the formula of how to make water. So the only thing that we can do is to preserve water. And how do we do that? Accreditation got a major role to play in preservation of water, making sure the recycling that can be done, so the contamination and things like that within a testing becomes quite important in that particular space. As Emmanuel said, the environmental standards becomes quite important of how we manage this scarce resource for the next generation. And then when we talk about sustainability, we're talking about a time frame, we're talking about generational impact. So how do we make things better now that can last for the next generation? And so accreditation in all the spheres of inspection, in certification or testing and all of that got an important role to play to give confidence at the end of the day that the scarce resources that we have, we manage them responsibly. So accreditation seems to be one of the only tools that we have to support the sustainability, as well as ensuring that we can leave something behind at the end of the day that is worthwhile and that can actually last for generations to come.
Yeah, great. Emanuele, you might want to touch on is it the Sustainability Working Group that IAF have newly formed? Is that what it's called? Sorry.
Yes, IAF established a new working group. Working group means a group of people that will meet regularly. So it's not one-shot activities. This one activity that will last for some years. There are three main themes of this working group. One is to understand these schemes. There are, I think, more than 100 schemes on sustainability. Sustainability, as we said, we go from environment to gender equality to social to poverty and so on. There are many schemes. The ESG goals of ONU are 17. So there are many different areas. So the first goal is to understand and to connect with these schemes. The other point is to, regarding the verification, how can accreditation bodies and conformity assessment bodies support the regulatory recognition and the voluntary market for this ESG reporting, as I said before. So it's important to connect these schemes to the rating, because today there are plenty of different ratings that, however, they have no really basis on this common basis. The other themes, the third one is the carbon market. So investigate the potential for accreditation bodies in voluntary carbon markets and how can we can support the demand of this carbon credit financial reporting. So these are three things. I'm quite proud of this working group because we have been able to involve in a short time really important institutions that demonstrates that there is a really interest. So I talk World Bank, WWF, ISO, ILAC, UNDP. So there are, and of course there are many others. So there are really important institutions that understood the value of this network, and the idea is to really connect these institutions that maybe are working on this team but on their own. So to make connection between institutions to understand if we're able to do something together, giving us priorities and trying to solve at least some of the issues, because we are not able to save the planet by our own. However, at least we have started connecting, understand what we can do by ourselves.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's a huge job, but it sounds like you've got a really good team there helping to try and bring accreditation to the forefront, I guess, in this ESG field, because I think it's really important. We've been focusing on environment and sustainability a lot, but there are two other concepts in this ESG framework, and that's the social welfare and corporate governance. I'll leave this open for either to answer, but how does accreditation affect these two components?
Maybe I give a couple of examples, and after I leave to Ron other ideas. A couple of examples are for health and safety. The main theme is health and safety, so the safety for the workers. So in this there are the most famous is ISO 45001, and we have some studies that demonstrate that this is a value. I can speak from Italy because I live in Italy and I know much better what happens here. And we had made the statistics with the local authority for the public insurance for the workers. And we have data that demonstrate that in company that where there is a certification, there is a huge reduction of the injured people on the job, but really important numbers. And there is a reduction in the number of the accident and also in the gravity of the accident. So demonstrate that if you have a system, if you have a mechanism implemented that is there to prevent the problems for the workers, it works. Of course, it's impossible to arrive to zero problem, but at least it works. So this is one example. So this is a great area. Another area is the social responsibility. I'd like to mention the standard that is about to be issued by BSI, PAS 24000, that is specific on the corporate responsibility. So there are two tools that are available. Also, ISO, this document issued by BSI is free of charge, so it's easy for everybody to download, start reading, and try to understand if each company is a good level, they are doing the right thing. So it's easy to understand what is good, what is right to do. The problem is to start and to have the commitment to do it. So I think these are the two main standards now available for these two areas.
Ron, did you want to add to that at all?
I think Emmanuel covered it quite nicely. Maybe this is the last component to that, which is dealing with, the social component in ESG really deals with the relationships between the companies and its employers, its suppliers, customers, but the community in the broader context of it. And sometimes you can't divorce the environmental issues impact of the decisions we make up there and the impact that they have on the social and the lives of people. But also everything that I said before, the issues of water and how we actually deal with that, these temperatures that we now experience and things like that, how that impacts on the community because of decisions we do make. So various standards obviously placed into that, such as your 9000 would also give guidance, even though it is a management system at that particular level, but it impacts on people, on education, and making sure that people understand what they need to do. In the communities, very specifically, we're starting to talk about the issues of the health and the safety of people. That we need to deal with, and how that is particularly managed. So if you go to the ISO 15189, for instance, those becomes important in terms of the health sector, of how they service those communities as such. So the accreditation have various facets and have various roles to play within each one of that. And for that, there are various standards and various programs within ILAC and in IAF as well, to ensure that the accreditation support that. Most of these issues, all of these issues that we're dealing with, is a key responsibility of governments. Government's responsibility for protection of health, safety, and the environment, so the health and the safety of the people, etc. And therefore, within that particular context, it becomes even more and more important that the acceptance of accreditation in decisions of government is advanced or is recognized, that it needs to play that particular role in assisting government to protect the environment. But similarly, like the same responsibility or obligation lies within the private sector, that they need to be able to start to recognize the importance of accreditation in whatever they do, and how they impact on the community, and how they actually offer and become responsible citizens in the implementation of the ESG matters.
Well, that sort of leads into my next question, which was going to be, how does this actually support the regulators at the end of the day? Do you want to give a little bit of a pitch maybe to the regulator as to why accreditation is so important in this area?
I can give you maybe a couple of examples. It's quite recent. Now IF approved the new database for managing system certification. This for me will be an important tool for regulators, because regulators, when they buy a massive numbers of things, and they really move the market. But also big companies, they move the market, but they don't know when they buy something, if they are buying something that is in good direction, if they are doing the right thing when they buy something. So this is very difficult to understand. So this database will allow everybody to understand if the company is certified for schemes for environment, for social responsibility, for quality, or for which is the need. So it's important to have the data. If you don't have the data, it will be impossible to make the right decision. So it's important that this tool will be free of charge for the regulators. So it will be easy for them to connect to the database for the public tenders. So everybody talks about the green public procurement. So this is a way to make this real. Otherwise, the regulators will receive a plenty of certificates that could be fake, or that could be maybe without a real value. So if we have an accreditation that guarantees that the certificate is valid and that the scheme is correct, that the scheme is not is there just only to make a declaration of useless part of the problem, but they go to the point. So there is a materiality analysis on the scheme. So the accreditation is really a way to have the guarantee that that certificate has some value. So with the value of the certificate and with the information that the certificate is valid and is correct, this will help the regulators when they make their choice, when they have to perform the green public procurement. So this is an important tool for me, that is also quite new. Other tools could be also some schemes, as I said before, that demonstrates that there is a reduction of the consumption of the energy, there are many examples in different economies where making connection with certification schemes, you have some reduction that could be injured people, or reduction of impact in the environment, reduction in the gender diversity. So it depends on which is the goal of the government. So the certification accreditation is tool that is on service to the regulator. They have to tell us which is the need. If the need is environment or whatever, when they identify the need, it's easy to make reference to certification to make a gentle nudge for the company to move. It's easier to price, to give an incentive to the companies to go in this direction instead of making obligation. It's an easy way to move companies to a certain direction instead of just trying to say from this day is forbidden. If you say from this day, if you are certified for this, you have some advantages, then it works. This is what I've learned in this year.
Oh, excellent. That sounds like we're moving in the right direction. I think we're almost out of time. So is there any last words you would like to add before we wrap this episode up?
My last word is that we are just only starting, of course, a journey. I think that the IF working group on sustainability is a good achievement, and also the database is a good achievement. So there are many different initiatives. There are also other initiatives that are not only connected to IF. For example, there is ISEA Alliance. So there are other initiatives. And it's good to be in connection with them. So we are not alone. This is also an important message. We are not just only working for us. We are also working with the others at international level, other institutions at international level for the same direction. So this is important. What we understood that we cannot work alone. We have to work also all the others. Others that maybe could be perceived as competitors. But now is not anymore the moment to talk about competitors in this field. So we have to work also with other institutions to understand each other what is good to do. So this is, I think, is changing.
Yeah.
Ron, any last words from you?
Yeah, from my side, at the two levels, government and in the private sector, I think there's normally a misperception that accreditation is there for trade matters only. And I think that's one of the key areas why the acceptance of accreditation within the regulatory space becomes sometimes challenging. But I think, and secondly, there's also a misperception that accreditation is competition or want to compete with the government institutions such as inspectorates, etc. And I think that is something that perceptions that needs to be broken down or break down, because accreditation is a tool that needs to assess government in its key responsibilities within the ESG matters, in the protection of the environment, the protection of the health and the safety of the people, which is their core functions and such. And accreditation can help to facilitate that and to help them make the key decisions. The other important things today is that the decisions government makes today is no longer only a health and safety issue. It becomes a trade issue. When we start to export food, apples or whatever that might be, there's health and safety issues attached to that. The same when we export meat, it's health and safety issues. So you can't almost divorce the issue of social and environmental alone. It's a combination of all of that. And so in all of that, accreditation plays a key role as a tool that can be used to assist government in both those areas. Same goes for the private sector as well. Private sector's aim is to make as much money as it can, but it needs to make that within the most responsible way it can. And therefore, the ESG matters becomes quite important. So accreditation, once again, we have the standards. We have the people and the competencies to perform that particular function to ensure that the tests, inspections, certification results, conformity assessment results can be relied on for them to make informed and right decisions on the way forward. Thank you.
Oh, thank you both. I think It's unfortunate that we don't have more time because I think we're really only scratching the surface here. But thank you both for joining us today. I've learnt a lot. For the listeners, if you want to learn more about accreditation and its benefits, we have the two case study websites. There is the Business Benefits website and the Public Sector Assurance website, and we will put the details in the episode notes, or you can head to iaf.nu or ilac.org. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, bye.